Hey guys, and welcome to one more episode of Builder Nation. For today's agenda, we have Yoav Landsman, founder and CEO of Moonscape, the new startup focused on providing information from the lunar services. So welcome, Yoav. Super happy to have you here. Super excited that we're finally here in the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for hosting me. So my name is Yoav Landsman. I worked for many years in the space industry. I started, actually most of my career was in Israel. I worked for 20 years, a bit more than 20 years in the space industry. I'm an aerospace engineer. I started working in the Israeli aerospace industry, which is a main contractor for most, if not all, of the space things that are built and designed in Israel, and also operated and even launched. So I worked on systems engineering and operations of communication satellites. And after 11 years, I decided to quit. I felt that I'm a bit bored, that it's more of the same with every project, even though I just started a brand new big satellite project. But I decided to do other things. During my work there, I studied planetary sciences for my master's degree. And I wanted to start a PhD in this field, in physics. So I quit it, and in the meantime, I gave lectures and I talked a lot about space and got interviewed a lot because this is something that I like to do, and I get the feeling that people really want to know more. I was out of the company for less than a year before another company came to me and proposed a job. That company was SpaceIL. It's actually a non-profit. And they started a lunar mission, a mission to the moon, to land on the moon. It's part of the Google Lunar X Prize competition back in 2013. And then I decided that I should join them because this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to make something really innovative and something that really breaks the boundaries of what we thought was possible, especially in Israel. So I joined in as a senior systems engineer, and later I was the deputy mission director of that mission, which launched on the beginning of 2019. At that point, the competition was already over. Google decided that they don't want to continue that and withdrew the prize. So basically, we just decided to continue because we were so close to launching that stuff. And that mission was a huge success until the very end when we crashed on the moon. But we made a lot of first achievements, like that was the first privately funded spacecraft to reach the moon, and the first private spacecraft to orbit the moon, etc. And after that mission was over in April 19, I decided that I want to make something to use that experience into something bigger, something that can contribute to the world effort toward the moon, because there was already several indications of that, and in the United States they actually want us to build another spacecraft, but it was hard to convince other people to join in for that. So I went to the space studies of the International Space University in Strasbourg. I spent the summer, 2 months in the summer over there, and I met a lot of new friends, a lot of other space geeks. And then I decided that what I'm going to do is to start my own enterprise. my own company as an entrepreneur. This was something a bit new to me, but I found partners and a lot of help with my friends from the ISU, and I started working on that project. At first, it was supposed to be a new lander for the moon, because I still have a lot of ideas how to make it more reliable and more affordable. But at some point I decided that this is not the right direction for me. There's a lot of companies that already work on such vehicles, and I'm going to arrive too late for that. And because I start with actually nothing, I can't have the IP of my previous missions, of course. And also I realized that funding of such a project is extremely difficult, because you measure success by successful landing on the surface. Your payloads will be other missions that will need to get to the moon safe for start, and to land safely on the moon, I can say from my first-hand experience that it's very difficult. So I decided to pivot into something a bit different, which will be hopefully easier to fund, and that is a constellation of satellites around the moon to provide data from the moon back to Earth, especially observation, but not necessarily just observation. I call it remote sensing in general, and to provide that data for stakeholders here on Earth, whether they are.
So you mentioned how hard it was to get investors at the beginning when you first had like your first idea.
Well, it still is. It still is difficult. It still is difficult.
Exactly. So do you have any, like, I don't know, learnings that you can share with us about talking with investors?
Well, I'll start with the lesson that I first got from it is that the location of the startup is very, very important. You need to start where people can understand what you're talking about. And at that time, I decided not to start that in Israel, but to move to Europe and eventually to Luxembourg. Because I found out that the ecosystem in Israel, even though it's very, very, it's very good for startups in general, but a space startup is not like other startups. You can't compare it to a mobile app startup, for example. You will not have an MVP until you launch, and you can't really. Basically, I would ask my investors to be much more patient and start with much higher risk, like giving me more money, basically. So it's something different. You need different people. You need different understandings. And here in Luxembourg, I feel that I don't need to explain it. People already understand. They are very focused on lunar resources. On the moon, they already understand several of the problems that I'm talking about. I don't need to convince them that these problems are real. So it's a good start. Unfortunately, I'm not funded yet. So it's a work in process. And in the meantime, I'm also consulting to other companies that work on different types of lunar programs. So there's a lot of activity here and in the world in general in that field. So yeah, there's a lot to be done.
And you were talking about the product market fit, most likely. So I know that you're in the pre-foundation phase. But what do you think your clients might be? I don't know, maybe some mining companies or government, or what do you think?
Both. I think it's easy to point at the governments because they already have projects for the moon, but now there are more than 200 missions planned for the moon right now for this decade. So with that amount of missions, even if just some of them will need such services, it will be worthwhile for me. In fact, observation is you can call it an infrastructure that needs to be established. And it's like other infrastructure that we understand as well, like transportation, for example. We need transportation in order to get to places and do stuff. In general, even on Earth. So there's a lot of talking right now about transportation to the moon, because we kind of achieved transportation to space in general, right? It's easy, sort of saying it's easy to get to space right now. It wasn't the same at all 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Now we have a lot of opportunities and a lot of services to provide that, and there will be more in the future. To the moon is a different story. Currently, you don't have anyone that's going to the moon. If you need to get your mission to the moon, you need to launch it into Earth orbit and use your own fuel to get to the moon. So as I see it in the future, you will have a transfer to the moon as a service. Right, and this is what's going on right now. There's a lot of companies that are trying to take care of the part where you get into lunar orbit, and then you can detach the orbiter and let it land wherever you want it to land. We'll get there, but it will take some time. And the same is with communication, navigation, and power generating, and other types of infrastructure that. Once it's there, it will be kind of easy to send a mission to the moon to do just the specific thing that you want to do on the moon, like mining, for example. So basically, we need a lot of pieces in the supply chain in order to make the economy work. And what I propose as a lunar observation is another piece. It's a supporting piece, because it will help you to be more aware of what you're doing, be aware of what others are doing that might interfere with you. You can, if you want to scale up your project or build more machines or habitats or solar arrays or whatever on the surface, it will help you plan for that. Currently, we have several orbiters around the moon that can provide images, but they are both governmental scientific missions, so they're not supposed to provide anything to commercial companies, although they can do that. But also, it's not with the right instruments. It's not the right resolution. It's not practical. And I want to provide something that will be useful for the people that will work there, or the machines that will work there.
I was curious to ask you, like, I understand that the easiest way, if we can put it like that, from one orbit to another, is by something that it's called an Almond transfer. So can you explain a little bit more about the process and how this is like?
Yes, this is the way to get to move between orbits around the same body of gravity, like the Earth, for example, because the moon is trapped inside the gravity of the Earth, right? It's satellite, basically. So we are not leaving Earth, really, when we go to the moon. So the Oman transfer is a way to do that with the minimum energy, which means minimum fuel, basically. It's very complicated, of course. You need to make sure that you're not hitting the moon. And if you don't do your calculations right, or you don't do that trajectory correction at the right time or at the right magnitude, then you might find yourself tossed into outer space, into heliocentric orbit around the sun.
And that leads me to my last question. What would you say are the next steps for Moonscape?
Well, to get funded. People ask me usually what are the main challenges, because there's a lot of challenges. How to communicate with the Earth in such distances, and how to do that with the bandwidth that you need if you want to deliver video files, for example. It's a real challenge, and there are many others. But the main challenge is funding, because if we have unlimited funding, of course we can send there a large spacecraft that can do everything on the same vehicle. Obviously, it's impossible. So we need to find the sweet spot between all the requirements and figure out how to do that in an effective way.
So thank you so much, Yoav, for being here, for sharing your experiences with us. Do you have any social media handles? Where can people find you? Where can people follow you or Moonscape?
So I think it's easiest to find me on LinkedIn, and Moonscape is also there, and you can see what I'm doing over there. There's a lot of cool stuff that's going on, and yeah, I try to be involved in whatever I can around the moon business and the moon policy making and the industry of the moon, and creating the ecosystem there.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And remember, guys, that you can also find more information, interesting articles, interesting interviews, just like this one we dropped directly on our website, ControlHub.com/builder-nation. We would love to hear from you. And once again, Yoav, thank you so much for being here, for taking the time, and for sharing about this new startup.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.